Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much indeed for tuning in. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Chris Tapp. I am the pastor at Stanmore Chapel, and it's a privilege to welcome you virtually, if you like, to the chapel this evening as we come on this Easter Sunday to think about the great subject of Easter Sunday. The whole question of life after death. Around the world today, hundreds of millions, billions of Christians will have been celebrating the resurrection of Jesus, and celebrating the fact that in Christ there is the possibility of life after death. And so we're just going to spend an hour or so this evening thinking about that subject and asking a number of questions. Can we really trust that what the Bible tells us about the resurrection of Jesus is true? Did it really happen? Are we supposed to think that it really happened? If it did, how can we know that that is for us? And what difference does it really make? Is it just a kind of a remarkable event in history, or does it make a real impact on us and on our lives today? So that's what we're going to be thinking about this evening. We're going to do that in three main ways. I'm going to speak for just a few moments about a little bit of Luke's gospel, Luke's account of the resurrection of Jesus, and just explore the way that Luke has informed us about that, to see whether we ought to take him seriously, to see whether we can trust what he tells us about Christ's resurrection. And then we're going to spend a little bit of time speaking to Stephen and Lorraine Doggett, who I think are known to a significant number of you. Stephen is one of the elders here at the chapel. Stephen and Lorraine and the boys have been valued members of the chapel now for many years. So we're going to be talking to them about the subject. And then there's going to be the opportunity for people to ask questions. The chat function to do that. Questions will come in, and then we'll have the opportunity to...
Can you give me some phone?
To put some of those questions to Stephen and Lorraine, or to me, depending on what those questions are. So I hope that makes sense. To begin with, let me see if I can make the technology work. What you can see in front of you now is a little bit of Luke's gospel. That is a little bit of Luke chapter 24, where Luke records for us the events of Christ's resurrection. And of course, it really matters as Christians, it really matters as people contemplating in faith, whether or not we can be certain about the resurrection. And if we can't be sure about the resurrection, then the Christian faith is a waste of time. The Bible itself tells us that. There's no point following somebody who uniquely promises death. There's no point following somebody who promises to raise you.
There's a candle on. Would you stop doing that?
Has clearly defeated him. If I can remember to put everybody on, if everybody can put themselves on mute. Thank you.
Or we can share.
Christians don't believe that
the light either side, Aaron, so
one who is living and ruling.
What are you doing?
Symbolically.
That's not here, Aaron. Stop being so rude.
Sorry.
You told us to put it on me.
You got on? Hey, turn that off, please.
Can everybody put themselves on mute, please? And so what you can see on your screen is a bit of a history book. It is a bit of Luke's gospel. I don't know if you ever thought about the Gospels, the books of the Bible like that, but right at the start, right at the start of his gospel, Luke tells us who he is and what he's doing and why he's doing it. He says to the man he's writing to, a man called Theophilus, with this in mind, I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning. I too decided to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus. How has he done that? Well, he's taken the evidence that has been handed down by the eyewitnesses and servants of the word. Luke was a doctor. He was an educated man who set out as a kind of investigative journalist, we're told. He wanted to ask the people who were there. He wanted to check the information about Jesus's life and death and resurrection. Now, he's obviously not the only source on these things. There are 3 other gospel accounts written by eyewitnesses. Specifically, when it comes to the resurrection, there are at least 2 other instances in the New Testament, in the book of Acts, in the book of 1 Corinthians, where we learn about other appearances of Jesus after Easter. Biblically speaking, the evidence is multiple and in complete agreement. It's overwhelming. Jesus really did rise from the dead. But I want us just for a few minutes to just think about this one example from Luke's gospel tonight, to think about the evidence. We're going to see very quickly 4 bits of evidence that Luke provides for us, 4 testimonies, you might say, that validate the reality, the truthfulness of Jesus's resurrection. And the first of those is eyewitness evidence. Luke gives us eyewitness testimony. How do we know that the resurrection happened? How do we know about the way that it happened? Well, we know because we have the first-hand account of those who were there. And I want to show you something that's interesting, I think, about the way that Luke writes. Luke makes a particular point of certain details in his gospel. And one of the details that he sometimes notes is people's names, but not all of them. Now, why is it that in Luke, some people are named and not others? For example, here in verse 10, Luke gives us 3 names: Mary Magdalene, Joanna, and Mary, the mother of James. That's not an exhaustive list. Luke then goes on to tell us that there were other women who were there as well, but he's given us the names of those 3. Now, why is that? Well, it seems that Luke is citing his sources. He's saying, these are the ones that were there. These are the specific eyewitnesses. These are the people that I've spoken to. And Luke was writing not very long after these things happened. So for the first readers of Luke, it would have actually been a case of, these are the people. You can go and speak to them yourself. You can go and check. So much of what we read about today in the papers, for example, is from vague sources, but this isn't kind of people close to the prince and that kind of thing. No, these are people named, identified, so that they could be verified, so that people could be certain of what they said, and therefore of what Luke says. So we get eyewitness testimony. Secondly, though, Luke records for us heavenly testimony. And we read in verse 4 there, while they were wondering about this, when they come to the empty tomb, the women are totally confused. But then in verse 5, at the end of verse 4, then what happens? Well, suddenly 2 men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. These 2 men in their amazing clothes, showing that they're not just men at all, they're angelic figures. These 2 testify as to what has happened. And the presence of angels at this point is no mistake. News of somebody coming back from the dead is so out of this world that no one would blame you for being skeptical about trusting mere human words. But here, if you like, we have the heavenly rubber stamp placed on the resurrection. Now, it might be that we think, hold on, this aspect weakens for me rather than strengthens the case. I mean, angels, come on, please. But what is more extraordinary? The claim that women saw angels, or the claim that Jesus rose physically from the dead? They're obviously both remarkable supernatural events, totally out of the ordinary, but that is the whole point. Angels in the Gospels, in fact, in the entire Bible, they're not everyday run-of-the-mill occurrences. They appear only when something totally out of this world is happening, to confirm, to validate that the seemingly unbelievable really should be believed. Now, if we were to decide that angels can't exist because we've never seen one, that the extraordinary can't be true because it doesn't normally happen, the supernatural can't be real because, well, it's not natural. Well, we've got to recognize that we're not necessarily judging the history on the evidence, but on the basis of our own predetermined conclusion. And that just isn't good history. That's blind faith in my own ability to determine what can and can't have happened. But it is notable that the way that the angels go about trying to convince the women that that Jesus is alive isn't simply to say, look, he's alive, just take our word for it. No, they can do better than that. Because this is our third piece of evidence. Jesus' own testimony comes in. We're told in verse 6, the angels say to them, he is not here, he is risen. Remember how he told you while he was still with you in Galilee. The Son of Man must be delivered over to the hands of sinners, be crucified, and on the third day be raised again. Now, all through the Gospels, we've seen that Jesus has a 100% record in what he says coming to pass. Jesus isn't just like a lucky tipster on a decent streak. He is utterly infallible. He perfectly predicted his arrest, his trial, his crucifixion. So why would you not expect his resurrection prediction to come true as well? Well, they didn't. I don't know if you noticed that verse 8, then they remembered his words. They'd forgotten previously what Jesus had taught. They didn't expect him to rise again. Despite the fact that now Christians view Jesus' death and resurrection as absolutely foundational to the faith, well, these women, Jesus' disciples at the time, they simply didn't expect it. They have to be reminded about the fact that he said it previously. And that makes perfect sense. Just put yourself in their shoes. People don't rise from the dead. No one has ever risen from the dead before. They hadn't been following Jesus because they thought he was going to die, but because he was alive. His character was beautiful. His teaching was remarkable. His works, his miracles were utterly mind-blowing. Jesus had testified that he would die and rise again, but they hadn't realized exactly what that meant until it happened. What we find in the Gospels is no orchestrated conspiracy. There's no plot to fabricate the resurrection on the part of the disciples. In fact, they come out of the accounts not looking particularly terrific themselves. Now, this is a very ordinary group of people mourning the loss of their leader and friend until something quite remarkable occurs. And that brings us to our final bit of evidence, our final testimony, which is the testimony of history. We see at the very end there, and highlighted in blue, and Peter's initial reaction. He's just like the women. He's not quite sure what's going on. He went away wondering to himself what had happened. What is going on? And yet, if we read on in Luke, we'd hear of Jesus appearing to his disciples, to Peter and the others, so that they see so clearly, so that they have so much certainty about who Jesus is, about what it means, that he is the way to life after death, that they were prepared to die to spread the news. The majority of Jesus's disciples were martyred, they were killed, because they were so convinced and so determined to tell others about Jesus. It was the resurrection that transformed Jesus' band of followers from a fragile, cowering bunch into the most dedicated spreaders of message that the world has ever seen. That is history's testimony. The spread of the message of Jesus and his resurrection is amazing. In fact, if the resurrection didn't truly happen, it is almost inexplicable. Christianity after Jesus wasn't planted into fertile soil. It began in the teeth of fierce opposition and violent oppression. Again, including the killing of many of those who testified to having seen Jesus and believed in him. And yet it exploded because those who had witnessed these things would not stop talking about them. If it were not true, they had absolutely no incentive for doing so. It was entirely in their interest to stop talking about it if they knew it to be a fiction. But they would not shut up. The resurrection, if it really did happen, and as I'm suggesting to you this evening, the evidence, when it's reasonably considered, suggests that it really did, is essentially the most important event in human history. We are people who are constantly overshadowed by the inevitability of death, by the universal, all-encompassing, dreadful shroud that it places over life. But in that shroud, a great tear has been rendered as Jesus Christ, just as he said he would, says so long to the tomb. And that is why Christians believe that just as he has been raised, well, so he shows us that there is something beyond this life, there is something beyond this world. And he shows us that he really can make good on his promises to raise us to eternal life also. So there is just something of the biblical evidence, the reason why Christians don't just celebrate the resurrection, but really believe it to be true. But we're just going to spend the next few minutes thinking about what difference does this actually make. And to do that, we're going to chat to Stephen and Lorraine, who are now allowed to unmute themselves.
Hello.
Evening, guys. Are you all right?
Yes, thank you.
Good, good. Lots of people on the call will know you, but potentially not everybody. So before we get on to talking about what's happening with you guys currently, just tell us a bit about who you are. Tell us a bit about what you do, where you come from, that sort of thing.
Okay. Go first.
I thought you were going to go first.
Okay. Well, my name is Stephen. I'm 40 years old. I've been married to Lorraine for 17 years. We have 3 children, the oldest of which is 12. And until recently, I worked in the city working for law firms doing marketing and communications. It's me.
Yeah, so I'm Lorraine. I'm also 40 years old. We both celebrated our 40th this year.
Also married 17 years.
Also married 17 years. Also have 3 children, funnily enough. So I join in. I just stay at home really and look after the boys and this one. I grew up in North London in Stanmore, and and I don't know much more else to add to that really.
No, that's terrific. Just tell us a little bit, both of you, about how you became Christians. How did you come to faith?
You want me to answer that one? Okay, so I think Stephen and I both had similar upbringings and different upbringings. Stephen was brought up in quite a strong Christian home, I would say, in the north of England. And I, like I said, was brought up in down south, but my mother is Roman Catholic, and my dad growing up didn't have too much faith in things, but that's changed, praise the Lord. So we met at university. I think it was the first year of university. We were in the same halls of residence, and cut a long story short, because I love to give long stories and I'm not very good at cutting them short. Basically, Stephen started talking to me about Christian things. He gave me a book, which actually I have here, called More Than a Carpenter, which I read while I was living in Spain, doing my year abroad. And that really convicted me, I would say. And I came to faith initially through that book. That really kind of became something for me. But together we started going to a church called St. Helens in the centre of London. And I think really we came to faith properly together by going to church together, hearing the gospel being preached faithfully week in, week out, going to Bible studies together. And eventually we got married at St. Helens. So that's kind of how we came to faith. Do you want to add anything to that?
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Brilliant, thank you. As a family, over the last few years, you've had a number of medical challenges. Do you want to tell us a little bit about those? Oh, sorry, Lorraine, you'll need to unmute. I've just muted everybody, which includes you.
Which includes
There we go,
me.
that's fine.
Okay. That's okay. So a few challenges that we've had. I think basically we haven't had too many really. God has been really good to us. But we, as most of you know, our youngest, who was born nearly 7 years ago, when I was pregnant with him, we were told, when I was 24 weeks pregnant with him, we had a scan up in UCL hospital, and we were told that he had a number of issues, abnormalities, especially in his brain. He had parts of his brain missing, and we were taken into a consultation room and told that he would be highly disabled, that basically he would be dependent on us for the rest of his life, and that, I'm going to say it, but that we should terminate the pregnancy. I straight away said no, we didn't, obviously. And now we have a very lively 6-year-old boy who has defied all the doctors and is a joy and beautiful. He still has his difficulties and is delayed in many things. But the Lord has been amazing, has been so good to us with Jeff, with that child. I can't say his name. Recently we had some great news in that he had a cyst on his spine that just disappeared. Doctors don't know the reason why, but they call it spontaneous resolution. And so he's doing really well. And then a year and a half ago, I was taken into another doctor's consultation room, which any of you that have been taken into a doctor's consultation room is not always great, and told that Stephen, after we rushed him into A&E a week before with horrific pains, told that the lesion they found in the chest of his wall was a rare form of cancer called synovial sarcoma, and that that it's not great. Basically, it's extremely rare. The other difficulty with being told that, when we were told that back in the summer of 2019, is that Stephen was in between 2 jobs at that time. So basically he'd given his notice at one place, was about to start a new place in 2 weeks' time, so in between jobs, basically without a job. So we've had a year and a half of chemo, radiotherapy, 2 surgeries, and all that's in between, really. So yeah, really, really tough times, but anything I've missed out?
No. Thank you, Lorraine. And Stephen, do you want to tell us what's the status of that currently? How are you now?
Yeah, so the first tumor that was discovered in 2019 was removed through those surgeries and other treatments that Lorraine mentioned, and then in October last year, it was discovered that I had 3 new tumours in my chest, on the left side of my chest, and that therefore there would be no medical cure for those tumours. And you know, as we sit here today, the prognosis is that I have maybe a number of weeks, perhaps a few months to live in this body. That's the medical prognosis. So yeah, that's where we are.
Thanks, Stephen. Now, I mean, a lot of people might find it very hard to believe in God, certainly in a good God, when those kind of things happen. But you've told us about your faith. You would say that there is a God and that God is good. How do you reconcile those things?
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose if I was running the world myself, which would be
Unnerving
for everyone, then probably I wouldn't have chosen this situation for myself and for my family. But when I come to the Bible, what I find is that there is a God that I read about in the Bible who is far superior and far above me. He created me, he made me, and so whilst I can't understand everything with my finite mind and finite resources, when I come to the Bible, I find that this God that I read about is actually loving and kind and also all powerful. And then even more than that, what I find when I read the Bible about this God is also not divorced from what goes on in this world and the difficulty, the challenges, the pain that happens in this world. And not only is he not divorced from it, but actually what I find in the Bible is that God himself, in the person of his son, Jesus Christ, has stepped into this world and has experienced living, weeping, suffering, even dying, as you were just reading earlier, Chris. And so therefore, when I put all that together and I see that, it gives me grounds for great confidence that actually, whilst I may not be able to see in any given circumstances exactly what is happening, I can be confident that God does know what is happening and actually can work great good through situations that to us just look difficult and challenging. And even in the last 18 months, there's been many things that Lorraine, myself, my family have experienced that were it not for this cancer and this situation, that we wouldn't have experienced good things. And so, I have every confidence that God can and is working not only good, but the very best for me and my family through this situation, even if I can't figure it all out for myself.
Yeah.
And we're thinking this evening, it's Easter Sunday, we're thinking resurrection, we're thinking about life after death. What would you say you believe about that? What do you think happens? What do you think there is?
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I think I'd probably say 3 things. First of all, I'd say that this life here and now is not all there is. Actually, again, when I read my Bible, what I find is that all of us, when we leave this life, will meet God, will meet our Creator. Second, I find when I read my Bible that as a Christian, as somebody who believes in Jesus Christ, believes that Christ rose from the dead, I need not have any fear of meeting God, because even though death itself is not pleasant, what I find when I read the Bible is actually for Christians, for people who trust in Jesus, leaving this life is called going home. It's going to be present with the Lord. And then thirdly, when I read the Bible, I find that actually just as Jesus came into this world once before, as we read about in the Gospels, the Bible tells me that Jesus is going to come back one day, what the Bible calls the last day. And on that day, Jesus will raise up everyone from the dead to life and resurrection to judgment. And what I find is that as a Christian on that day, I will be given a new body, a better body, a body that doesn't have the tumors that this body I'm in now has. And on that day, I will enter into God's new creation with the Lord Jesus, with everyone who's trusted in Him. So yeah, those are the things that you know, I think are really helpful for us in this situation, knowing that.
And what would you say to somebody who says, well, that is, I mean, that's lovely, like that's a nice idea, and if that were true, it would be great, but you just can't know that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the question there is what it means to know. I mean, there are certain things that we do know. We know that we're going to die. That's pretty certain. And then the Bible, like I said, says that after we die, we will meet God, and whether or not somebody believes that now or not, if that is true, then at a time in the future when they leave this world, they will know that for sure. But you know, I think we can go further than that. You know, somebody once said that you will never find after you die and found heaven before you die. And I think what they meant by that was that the way to heaven, the way to eternal life, the way to real life after death, the way to be found right with God, well, that is the answer to that is found in this life here and now. It's found in this person Jesus that we've been reading about, and so therefore, when you read about Jesus, when you read about Jesus having risen again, when you read through the gospel accounts, I don't think you can be in any doubt that actually this person Jesus that we read about really did rise again, along the lines that you were talking about earlier, Chris. So therefore, I think, you know, my challenge to the question would be, how can we know, is, well, what would it actually take beyond the level of evidence we've already got in the Bible, which is backed up by history, backed up by millions and billions of people having believed it through history as well. Not that that necessarily needs to be the deciding factor, but it is a factor. So I think I'd want to turn that question around and say, well, you know, how much, what would you need to really know? And is it a case of level of certainty, or is it just that you don't, you know, maybe you don't want to know what the Bible really says? Did I answer that? Did I answer the question?
Yeah, I think you did. Lorraine, are you happy with that as an answer?
Yeah.
Good.
Better than I would answer it.
Just tell us then, do you think, how much of a difference do you think believing what you believe about life after death, about Jesus' resurrection, and therefore about your own, how much of a difference do you think that has made to how you have responded to this illness, how you've responded to the situation you've found yourselves in the last couple of years?
Yeah. Me, I think both of us have got a very different story on that. Mine, yeah, I think how I've responded to Stephen's illness, I think initially was with great fear and absolute uncertainty and despair, confusion. So yeah, initially how I dealt with Stephen's cancer was not good. I think I described it once as I felt like Alice in Wonderland, falling down that rabbit hole, trying to grab hold of anything I could possibly grab hold of, and I just spiraled. If I'm honest, I totally spiraled. There's some people on here that know just how far I fell. I questioned everything. I even questioned if God actually existed at my lowest point. I think I was there like, is this my faith really true? And actually, have I just made this all up? And I really struggled with it. How I've dealt with that, or I would say how God has dealt with that, because if it was down to me, I'd still be there. But how God has dealt with that has been amazing, with a lot of patience and a lot of love, because I really resisted. I think it was a case of me realizing what God has shown me is that how much I want to be in control of things. I think that's what fear tends to kind of show you, that actually you're a bit of a control freak, and you want to be in control. And when you can't be in control, you panic and you fear. And I think I've had to go back and I had to look at what God has done in my life. And I had to really literally go back right to the beginning, go back to when I met Stephen, go back to how the Lord opened my eyes to the gospel, and where my life was and where my life is now, and how God has been so faithful to me. Again, through what happened with our youngest son as well. I think he was saying to me, look, I carried you through that. I'm going to carry you through this. And there was one verse in particular that I think spoke to me the most in the Bible. It's in the book of Proverbs. I've told so many people this verse because for me it's been my life jacket. It's in the book of Proverbs, chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. And it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path. And that bit there, it says, lean not on your own understanding, really convicted me, because when we found out about Stephen, and even the second time when we found out it was terminal, the first thing I said, and I'm sure many people would say in that situation, is why? Why, God? Why does this have to happen? He's 38 years old at that time. We have 3 small children. You know, we've gone through this with our youngest where we were told bad news. You know, why am I having to go through this all over again? Why have you deserted me? And I was trying to reason with it. I was buying stupid books that said how to cure your cancer. I was putting Stephen on a sugar-free diet, which he loved. And really, that verse said to me, stop. You know, just stop. Don't try and understand it. Don't try and figure it out, because you will never figure it out. You don't know. You're not God. And I think for me, this whole thing and how my faith has helped me through it was for me to realize I am not God. I cannot control things, but there is a good and gracious and great God who is omnipotent and omniscient and above all knowledge, who is in control from the beginning to the end. He knows how this is going to finish, and it will finish in glory. And that's what we've held on to, and that's what I know to be true. That's my journey.
I can't add to that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Fine.
Thank you, Lorraine. I've just got one more question for you in a moment, but just to let people know that in just a moment there'll be the chance for questions about anything that's been said this evening. So please do feel free to use the chat function to begin sending those questions in. We'll have a good sort of 10-15 minutes to do that in just a few moments. Final question for you guys then. If if there was one thing that you could say to people listening, people on this call now, people who might watch the recording, something like that, one, I don't know, question to think about, or one thing to do as we kind of reflect on life now, and as we reflect on the whole question of life after death, what would that one thing be?
I'm going to say three things. I would say,
I'm not totally surprised.
Yeah.
First of all, listen to your message, Chris, on the stanmorechapel.org .uk website on John 20 this morning, the Easter Sunday message. I thought it was great this morning, so that would be well worth listening to for further information around how can we be sure that Christ really did rise again. Secondly, I think you're planning a Christianity Explored course, so if people have got questions around what is a Christian and how can we be sure on the facts and so on, again, I'd encourage people to sign up for that. And then thirdly, I think I'd just encourage people to get in the regular habit of just kind of taking a looking at the back of their hand every now and again, because I think, as we all get older, one of the things that kind of betrays our age oftentimes is our hands. The skin gets a little bit thinner, a little bit more mottled, and so on. And I think it's just a good exercise as you go through life to every now and again remind yourself that you are actually getting older, your body is decaying, and whether you're 40 years, 60 years, 80 years, 100, 120 years, at some point, you're going to be in the same sort of position I'm in, which is facing potentially an imminent death. And I think it's well worth everyone being aware of that and prepared for that. So getting in that habit of just reminding yourself that actually, you're not going to be here in this body forever.
Stephen, Lorraine, I'm going to take your answer, but you're probably just going to give us all about 10 seconds, because I think that probably everybody on the call is now just noticing some sort of detail about the back of their hand.
Oh, right, yeah.
They've not previously clocked.
No, I was just going
Lorraine?
to quickly add that there was that I was just looking at this Bible, and this Bible was given to me by somebody on my 21st birthday, and he wrote this, and I'm going to try and say it without crying, because I don't think I've never been able to really say it without.
We haven't practiced this. I wasn't aware of this.
Practiced this.
It's a long time ago.
This was a long time ago, and you wrote in here, love, there is no truth anywhere, anytime, any place in this world that is not written here. If we believe this, then we can never go wrong or fall apart. You love me, I love you, God is love. And on your 21st, may we still hold these words decades from now. Love always, Stephen. And yeah, and that's what's brought us through. So yeah, that's all I was going to say.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you, guys. We will take questions in just a moment, so please do use the chat if you have questions about any of these things that you'd like to put to Stephen, Lorraine, or to me about what we were looking at earlier on Luke's Gospel. As Stephen mentioned, we are holding a Christianity Explored course here at the chapel, although not physically at the chapel. We're going to be doing it online like this using Zoom. And that is going to start in exactly 2 weeks' time. So we're going to do that at 8 o'clock on Sunday evenings, starting on Sunday, the quick maths, 18th of April. So everybody, wherever you are, you're more than welcome to sign up for that because we're using Zoom for that. If you want to let us know in advance, you can use the Contact Us tab on the Stanmore Chapel website. If you let us know through that and you give me your address, your postal address, I can post to you the book, a copy of Mark's Gospel, and the handbook that comes along with Christianity Explored. the way Christianity Explored works is it takes us through Mark's Gospels. Read all of Mark's Gospel. Lots of us may never have read all the way through a Gospel account, all the way through one of the accounts of the life, death, and resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ. And as we've heard this evening, as Lorraine was just telling us, as Christians, we believe that in the Bible, that is where we find real truth, and that is where we find what we need to know about the very biggest questions we could ask. And so we think that it's certainly worth, wherever we stand at the moment, and wherever we might stand having done so, it's worth all of us at some stage really giving ourselves some time to think about these things and to explore the evidence for ourselves. And so that's what Christianity Explored does. Over a few weeks, we'll work through Mark's Gospel. There'll be a chance each week to think about a little passage to discuss. Any question is absolutely fine. So like I say, that is starting in 2 weeks' time on Sunday, the 18th of April at 8 p.m. That'll be on Zoom. So you can sign up using the Contact Us tab on the chapel website. Brilliant. That is more than enough from me. Do we have any questions? Yes, we do. A second. Like I say, you can use the chat function. Those questions don't go out publicly. They just come in. They just come in here to me. Question for you, Stephen. How you feel about these things, has it changed, do you think, since your diagnosis? Has how you think about, I guess, these things, presumably kind of life after death, your faith in general, maybe, have they changed, do you think, since your diagnosis?
Yeah, I don't know whether they've changed, but I think they've come into much sharper focus. So, if we rewind back to summer 2019, like Lorraine said, I was looking to start a new job, would have been a slightly bigger role, pay rise. We were thinking about moving house, thinking about, where the boys go to school, thinking about future holidays, all that stuff and so on. And, all of that was kind of blown out the water by this diagnosis. And, it came completely out of the blue. I'd never had never been in hospital for anything for myself before. And, I've still got 3 grandparents alive in their 90s, and the one that's not alive was in his 90s when he passed away. So, we were fully geared up for me having a long existence in this world. So, the Lord decided it was right and best for us to kind of take that away, and the kind of carpet was kind of pulled out from under us at that point. So, one of the blessings over the last 18 months is actually it really has enabled us to strip away a lot of the kind of glittery stuff in this life that can be a distraction oftentimes, and really focus on what matters, and ultimately, like I said, and not wanted to be morbid, all of us are only on this planet in these bodies for a finite period of time, and all of us will leave this world and go out into eternity. And I'm tremendously grateful that I've had this 18 months to be able to think and reflect and read my Bible on those things. People leave this world all of a sudden in the most immediate ways, car crashes or whatever, and don't COVID, and they don't have the time to think and prepare and so on. So I don't think my thinking's changed, but the focus is definitely a lot sharper, and actually, I can see how God has worked in all of our lives as a family to mature us, to grow us in many good ways through this.
Brilliant, thank you. Another question about books. Is there anything that you've read that has been particularly helpful in this last couple of years?
Yeah, I think I've been the big book reader I literally consumed books
on this subject.
on this subject. Again, because I think I went through such huge anxiety. So one book that I'm currently reading, and I think for me the big thing that I personally felt, I mean, it wasn't a big change for Stephen in terms of his spiritual faith. He's always had such a strong faith, but I think it really highlighted to me my weak faith at that time. No, I think, but the thing that I've definitely can say that I didn't really know was who God truly is. And I think even as strong Christians, sometimes we don't really truly know who God is. And I think these COVID times in particular have shown that you know, God is in control of everything. God created everything, and he's not like us. A lot of the time our problem is that we seem to think we're God and not realize and view God in the same way. You know, oh, God doesn't have time for me, but God doesn't work in that way. God doesn't do time. He's above time, he's beyond time. And this book is what I'm reading at the moment, and I find it's just so helpful, and I really love this writer, Jen Wilkin. Has written a book called, I don't know if you can see, it's called None Like Him, and it says 10 ways God is different from us and why that's a good thing. And I've really appreciated this woman. She's American, but her ministry is a really strong ministry, and I've really thought, and they're just great, 10 great ways in which God is different, and it's such a tremendous comfort. And especially like we were saying, during these COVID times when it looks like the whole world has been turned upside down, back to front, we've got no control, nobody knows what's going on. Okay, now we've got the vaccine, and that's given us a glimmer of hope. But where is God in that, and who is God in that? And this book really does kind of help you, especially with those of us who tend to despair and worry and get anxious about things, to know that God is just in everything. He is God. He is above and beyond. And to know who God is one of the most important things. And we will never know truly who God is. But this woman in this book has really helped me to kind of, to understand that a little bit better. And that's always a good thing.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lorraine.
Okay. You? Any books from you? Just the Bible.
Yeah. I've read things. Nothing immediately jumps out.
Okay.
Couple of questions on about healing. So it's interesting you told us about Jesse defying doctors left, right, and centre. What would you? I'm trying to sort of paraphrase a couple of different questions that have come in about this. Do you think God heals, or do you just trust his will rather than praying to God for healing and those kind of things? How do we balance those two things?
Yeah, so I believe God is 100% sovereign, so he can heal, and
he might still do so.
And I have no doubt in the example of our youngest child, that cyst that he had, we were told on a number of occasions that he would have to have surgery. That was a medical certainty, and that we were just being stubborn by resisting that surgery early on. And actually now it's completely gone, and the doctors say we don't know how it's happened. It's very rare. It's spontaneous resolution, and we believe that's an answer to prayer. But at the same time, there's no guarantee in the Bible that God will heal us of all of our physical ailments in this life. And actually quite the contrary. When you read through the Bible, what you find oftentimes is that God's people suffer. You can hardly turn a page of the Bible without finding that God's people suffer, and obviously supremely the Lord Jesus Christ himself suffered and died, and our suffering is nothing like the suffering that he went through. And so God uses suffering and pain and the challenge of living in this world, even what we would call relatively premature deaths and so on to do good things and to do his work. And I have no doubt that if the medical prognosis is correct, and I'm go to be with the Lord in the coming weeks and months, I have no doubt that God can use that for great good with my family. And I have no doubt that in God's eternal plan and purpose, it is also the very best thing for me.
Yeah.
God knows exactly what would happen in the days and years and months to come if I was kept on this earth. So who am I to argue with that? But I've got a friend in Ireland who said to me recently, which was a very comforting thought, that I won't leave this life one day before God has ordained for me to leave this life, and equally I won't leave this life one day after God has ordained for me to leave this life. And so it's in his hands, and I know that he is doing the best for us. And if that means death, as we see oftentimes in the scriptures with God's people, well, I've got to trust God in that. And if he should choose to keep me in this body for longer, then well, praise the Lord for that too. So that's how I view it.
Thanks, Stephen. We've had a number of questions about parenting through a trial like this. How do you talk about, how do you prepare children, help them understand a situation like this?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, actually. That's not, can I just say, we are not an expert on this one at all. And whether we've done rightly or wrongly, we don't know. So how we've dealt with that with the boys is we've just been honest, really. We've been very honest with them. Whether people know or not, I think the older two went to live with grandparents for the first 6 months after Stephen's diagnosis, mainly because Stephen went through chemo and it was horrific, absolutely horrendous. And I think in some ways we wanted to spare them from that. So that was tough. That was probably the toughest part, I think. But they did it and they were amazing. But yeah, we've just been so open and honest with them with everything. We've sat down with them. That's been really hard, especially in October when we found out that the cancer had come back. So we just sat them down and told them that that's what's happened. Obviously heartbreaking. I don't think they fully understand yet, obviously, but yeah, we've done that. We've also had a bit of counselling. And I think that was helpful because that kind of confirmed to us that what we were doing was right as well. But in all, I think we've just, it like Stephen said, it has actually brought us closer as a family in many ways, and that's been the biggest blessing. But it's been tough. It has been tough. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, as parents, what are we doing? We've got our children for a relatively short period of time to prepare them as best we can with the skills and the gifts we've been given for them going on and making their own lives in this world. And actually, the thing we're going through here is a real part of living in this world. So we're not gonna hide it and sugarcoat things. This is reality, and they're learning lessons that actually may be painful and difficult, and obviously we want to give them all the support we can, but lessons that I fully believe are going to be of tremendous use and significance to them as they go on in their life. And lessons I never learned and you never learned at that age, but I think will be a benefit to them. Not to say that there's not pain and difficulty as well, but ultimately I've got to trust that God knows that as well, and he does.
Definitely.
One final question, which is an almost identical question that we've had from 3 people. which is what can we be praying for you guys in as you look ahead to the coming weeks and months. Those of us who are believers on the call will be wanting to keep you before the Lord in prayer. What can we be praying?
Yeah, I mean, one. I mean, part of the challenge at the moment for me personally is, I'm not having any treatment, and there are other treatments out there that might have some great doctors, and the doctors say you could try this or you could try that, but you never know. You never know whether anything's going to be effective, and if it is effective, what does that mean? Does it mean it gives you a few more weeks or a few more months or whatever? So I think just wisdom around knowing whether it's sensible to try different treatments. I mean, until we had the terminal diagnosis, and I went through everything. I went through all the chemotherapy. I went through the toughest levels of chemotherapy and the radiotherapy and so on. We were fully, on a track of using the gift of doctors to eradicate this thing. But it came back, and then we were told, there's no medical possibility of eradicating it now. So the question is, and then the treatment I had immediately after that didn't work at all and made me very sick and so on. So the thing we wrestle with is, should I try some of these other treatments which in all likelihood will make me sick again, and they may or may not have some effect, but it's just balancing, if I only got a finite short period of time with my family, with my children and so on, do I want to get sick again? Is it worth it? So just wisdom around thinking through some of those other treatments is something that personally I'm thinking and praying about.
Yeah, I think just one other thing with regards to Stephen is he's finding it very difficult to sleep at night. Got lots of pain during the whole night really, and it's a case of lots of painkillers, sleeping tablets, and sometimes that works, and sadly sometimes that doesn't work, and that's you're struggling with a lot at the moment, aren't you? So prayer that the Lord be merciful, and which he is, but just pray that maybe Stephen can get some respite from the pain and suffering a little bit, and that be God's will. And we're just so grateful to everybody who's been praying. I mean, the prayers really have been answered. I think we've definitely felt the Lord has just carried us through completely. I still suffer with a bit of anxiety, but God has just totally been carrying us and strengthening us as he promised he would do, and that is a promise that we are holding on to and we know to be true. So
Well, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us, and please rest assured we will of course be praying for you. We love you guys, and really grateful for sharing with us this evening. As we mentioned earlier, we'd love for people to, in one sense, continue this conversation. You're very welcome to get in touch. If you know the Doggetts, I'm sure if you have further questions, I'm sure they'd be very happy to answer them. We're very happy to answer any questions here at the chapel. And in 2 weeks' time, Sunday the 18th of April, we will begin that online Christianity Explored course. So please do feel free to sign up for that. We said we would be done about 9. We've overrun slightly. I hope I've not kept anybody too long from, line of duty, something like that. Must be on a Sunday night. But this was a bit better, wasn't it? So thank you very much indeed, everybody, for joining us. Somebody had asked the name of the book, Lorraine. Is it None Like Him by Jen Wilkin?
That's it, None Like Him by Jen Wilkin. And if I can just put in one more book, also very good with regards to suffering, God's Grace in Your Suffering by David Powlison, who I found very helpful as well. But they're the two books that I've currently been reading and found very helpful.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Lorraine. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, for joining us. This evening has been recorded, and that will go up on the chapel website. If you'd like to watch again, or if you'd like to share with others, you'd be very welcome to do so. Thank you very much indeed.